Welcome to a special edition of the Ankler Podcast. This is Sean McNulty of the Wake Up newsletter here at the Ankler, and I'm joined by Ankler CEO Janice Min, who had a interesting conversation here with a former magazine entrepreneur. Is that right, Janice? Is Shane Smith? Is that how we refer to him these days?
Yes, it wasn't with myself. It was with Shane Smith. So he is mounting a quasi comeback out of semi-retirement, if that makes sense. He has a new podcast, which was the impetus for this interview. But he also talks about a bunch of topics. The quote that I think people will remember he says in this conversation is, "I'm Michael Corleone from The Godfather."
All right.
And I hope what I'm doing isn't Godfather 3.
As we all do, Janice, but yes, exactly.
As we all do.
Yeah.
He reflects on Vice, what went wrong, who he blames for what went wrong, what he thinks about Bob Iger and Rupert Murdoch's investment.
Okay.
He says he is not a flim-flam artist. He did not. They're big boys is basically what he says. And he has a lot of thoughts about the future of media, and then talks about his new podcast, which the first episode goes a lot into the deep state, which you will hear him talk a lot about the deep state.
But he also touches on Hollywood a little bit, some Writers Guild thoughts as well, and a little bit on the strikes last year. Yeah,
cover your ears, writers. You aren't going to like what Shane Smith has to say about your future. And not unrelated, his thoughts on what AI is going to do to all of us.
Oh, well, there we go. Well, without further ado, then, here's Janice's conversation with Shane Smith.
Hi, I am Janice Min. I am here in LA in different studios with Shane Smith, who needs no introduction. Shane, you scared me for a second when you were sitting down in the frame. I thought you were wearing a blazer. But
Sure. It's sort of it's a communist blazer.
Well, I think it's called a shacket. Shirt plus jacket. Yeah.
So, no. It's a variation of the Canadian tuxedo. So the Canadian tuxedo is just jeans and a jean jacket. But this is sort of like, I wear black jeans, and this is sort of a Levi's jean jacket, but it's like their fashion-y one. But yeah, so I'm wearing basically the Canadian tuxedo.
All right, you wear it well, and coming from a Canadian, so it makes sense.
There you go.
Okay, so there are a lot of things I want to talk to you about today.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know. Get ready, including your new podcast and what exactly Vice is today, your thoughts on media, because I know you have a lot. And then, I want to go back a little historic about what happened with Vice. You knew that was coming.
Your front end, that's what we call front end loading the interview. You're putting the things up top that I want to talk about and then saying, but to pay for that, you have to go and talk about a decade ago.
Yeah, well, you can throw off the headphones and walk off the set, and
sure. Well, I do that anyway. I do that on every interview anyway. Unless you leave in a huff,
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so someone sent me a photo of your giant face on a billboard in Times Square this week.
Oh, God,
And so you've been out of the public eye, hanging back for 5 years, even though Vice certainly has stayed in the headlines. So you are back? You're coming back? You're coming back.
Don't call it a comeback.
As a public, as one of the public faces of Vice.
That's a valid question. Not 5 years, but I sort of moved to LA because, our biggest clients were out here. We were doing more in media. Our biggest partners were out here. So I love New York and the nightlife and the people, and it's the hardest city to live in, but that's where the people are so tough. And then I moved to LA and was like, oh, wait a minute. This is on offer. I can live here with palm trees and swimming pools and movie stars, the Beverly Hillbillies. So I moved out here, and I was basically semi-retired. I was doing a bunch of stuff. I'm doing some things with AI companies. I still work for Vice, but there's a time for a founder who likes to build things. I'm a builder. As you can see, I like to shoot and make stuff and build stuff from the beginning. And then there's a time for operators. And the greatest time for me at Vice was the mid years. It's been 30 years this year, the mid years, where you would go to Milan, you would rent an apartment, you would find an office, you would find the like-minded people to work for you. You would start from scratch and just start making a magazine and a media company. And then it turns into flying in, meeting a bunch of lawyers and accountants for 24 hours and turning purple because everyone's doing it wrong, and then fly out. And when it starts to become that, then, a founder pulls himself out of it. But I still was doing news, and I love news, and, I was doing the HBO show, and then I was doing Vice News. And now, because this electoral cycle is crazy, and because I have a lot of friends in the business who are saying, you should come back and do a podcast, we always have the most interesting discussions. And because I think there's a massive, the Nixonian great center, the great silent majority is out there, and things have become so polarized and politicized that you have the right breeding fear, and you have the left doing snide comedy, and ne'er the twain shall meet. And so we said, let's just do a podcast where we talk to people from both sides, where we're non-political, where we try to come to the root of a lot of these big, the idea is the biggest stories are actually now on social media. Nobody's reporting on them. No one's attacking them like investigative journalists. And let's go find the root of, where the traffic's coming from. A lot of it's coming from the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. A lot of it's coming from Free Syrian Army. A lot of it's coming from Iran. A lot of it's coming from Russia, who has said they want to affect our elections. So basically, a lot of people, I'm essentially Michael Corleone, and I had two successful things, and now they're pulling me back in just when I thought I was out, which hopefully it's not as bad as Godfather 3, but but we're back and we're shooting a lot, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, let's talk about the logistics of this show. So Bill Maher is a producer on the show, and will be a recurring guest.
Yeah, so Bill and I were partners on the Vice on HBO show, and so that was 7 seasons, and so we had a lot of fun doing that together. And he's on fire now. He's his show is on fire, and he's great, and #1 best-selling book, and his podcast is fucking awesome, and he's everywhere on the internet, and he's politically incredibly astute and funny and cutting and great. And so we decided.
And he's hard to define politically, right? Is he libertarian? Is that the closest way to define Bill Maher?
I'm not going to define him. He's a smart guy. He looks at stuff and he decides for himself. I don't know if that's libertarian or not, but I think that's the classic definition of libertarian, maybe. But so Bill and I are doing this together. He's producing it, and his company, Club Random, who are great, and Chris, our producer, is awesome, and the whole team is awesome.
Okay, so your first episode, which debuts October 8th, is that correct?
Maybe.
Okay.
You know more than me. It's the internet. There's lots of wiggle room.
I'm going by what I was told. So
I just show up and shoot it, man.
All right. Well, your first topic, you weren't kidding when you said it will be about this political election season. And I was told it is about the so-called deep state and the Trump assassination attempts with an S. Multiple. So let's talk about that. For starters, are you saying deep state as in it's a real thing? Or just tell me how you're thinking about this.
That's a great question. So a lot of policy is being informed by social media. A lot of political opinions are being formed by social media. And nobody's really attacking the givens in social media. So that question is a perfect question. So we go in with no preconceptions. We're like, okay, there's these assassination attempts, right? And the first thing that I saw online, which I was fascinated by, were snipers. So there's this war of snipers, like 17 seconds after the first attempt, Butler, of snipers, like ex-Green Berets, ex-SEAL Team 6, and they were saying, like, unequivocally, this is an inside job. And then other ones were saying no, but they were describing the minutia of the Secret Service snipers and how the guy had shot it, and there was ballistics experts recreating the trajectory and all this stuff, which I found fascinating. And there's two competing theories. One is the immaculate ear Iwo Jima side, which is it's just too fucking good. I mean, he comes up and goes like fight and the blood and the American flag, and at the time, his numbers weren't good. And so, it's just this Iwo Jima-like imagery.
Sure.
It's too good to be true. And then he wears a thing on his ear for 3 days, and then his ear is perfectly fine after being shot by a high-velocity firearm. So that's the liberal side. The Republican side is it's a deep state conspiracy, and he's going to clear the swamp and expose the deep state, and they want to get rid of him. And these are the two things that came out in the beginning. So we interviewed everybody. We got the snipers, we got the ballistics guys. We have the head of Trump security for 18 years. We have the head of the guy who teaches, he teaches presidential detail for the Secret Service. We go into it, and basically the official thing, and if you talk to anybody who is sort of intimately involved, it's sort of a Keystone Cop scenario. It's like, well, we fell down and there's no conversation between the local PD and the private guys and the Secret Service, and it was just a huge failure and sort of boring, sort of like the Kennedy assassination. Well, it was one bullet that went into 17 people and fucking fell off onto the fucking thing. And so we started then talking about more assassinations, and exactly what you said, the deep state keeps coming up, and you're like, well, what the fuck is the deep state, And then we had people explain what the deep state is. And do you know what the deep state is?
I feel like the deep state is a catch-all for when people think dark forces are at work.
Well, that's what I thought too. The deep state is a really sort of politically loaded term, and especially from online. The deep state, and I actually literally interviewed the guy, and I got it wrong. I said he coined the term, but there was a guy in Turkey who coined the term. There is a mixture of the political apparatus, the economic apparatus, secret police, and the underworld, right? And so the guy, Peter Dale Scott, the guy who brought it to America, who's now 95, and maybe the most interesting dude I've ever talked to, who can just recite off like facts and figures like anything. He, in the 70s, wrote a book and brought this sort of term, deep state, to America to describe the Bay of Pigs assassination attempts, where the American government, and this is all real, the American government, the CIA, and the mafia all aligned to try to assassinate Fidel Castro, and then started a thing called Air America, which was this is all verified. I mean, the CIA was funneling drugs with Chinese nationalists and all this stuff. So he coined the term, and he brought it up. And basically, the term is there's all of these people who are career bureaucrats in the Pentagon or in intelligence agencies, and then there's a rotating cast of these characters who become generals or senior directors. They then end up running, Raytheon, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, because they come from the Army, and then they go over and they get the contracts, and trillions of dollars are at stake. And these people have vested interests in Ukraine, in Vietnam, in various conflicts. And do they act in their own self-interest? Yes. And are they career bureaucrats that are not elected in, that are not affected by whatever president is in? And do they act in cahoots with the military-industrial complex that they've created? Yes. And have they historically acted to do political things? Yes. Now, what it means now is a quasi-liberal, thing that's nefarious and dark. But the actual deep state in and of itself, the actual term does exist and has existed, and historically there's a lot of proof to it.
So Shane, did you personally leave the podcast more or less convinced of a deep state?
Well, I mean, it's all phraseology. I mean, I know from firsthand that there is such thing as a military-industrial complex because I've seen it at work. And there's no difference between, let's say, a military-industrial complex and Big Pharma. I mean, Big Pharma, there was 6 senators, 6 congresspeople who famously wrote the Big Pharma bill, and the average salary was $175,000. All 12 went into the pharmaceutical industry, and now the average salary is $23 million. So that's given. That's fine. That exists. Big Pharma, everyone, of course, they cluck like hens. Of course, Big Pharma. Big oil, sure. Big food, got it. Monsanto, yes. Oh, military-industrial complex, no. So military-industrial complex 100% exists. And basically, this is a sort of, you're adding in the wonks. You're adding in, the bureaucrats into that milieu, which 100% exists. So the deep state, and when I say it's phraseology, is used now as a political term. What I'm trying to get to is the root of what it actually means and where it came from. And does that exist? And the answer is unequivocally yes.
Do you personally, do you think what listeners will walk away believing these gunmen did not act alone in the attempted assassination of Trump? No.
No. Because, so on the technical side, we sort of go into it and say, if you believe the snipers, who we interview all of them, the snipers kind of get there in the end of like, well, it was just a fuck up. So do we prove that the deep state is trying to assassinate Trump? No, that's not what the show does. We go in and we talk to all the experts and get into that stuff. But when people start bandying about terms like the deep state, we're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
So, when you started Vice and were in the big growth heyday a decade ago, you were targeting millennials and who are now, middle-aged old people like everyone else now.
Sad.
Yes, it's super sad. But this sounds like you've rethought audience focus. You seem to be wanting to reach people who are in a point of view about the world, less so than in a demographic.
100% not true. Just seriously, because fanzines, the early days of Vice was a Gen X thing. It was desktop publishing. We bozos can now make a magazine, and so we did. And then when we became the Millennial Whisperers, was not any sort of demographic, that's what we're going to do. We're going to switch to the millennials. Spike Jonze said, do you film your articles? And we said, yes. And then went back to the studio saying, well, how do we film our articles? Because we weren't. And so we started filming them, and the millennials just happened to live online. We were in the right place at the right time with online video, and we became the millennial, company because we were just the first movers to online video. We're making no demographic or whatever audience idea. I was saying to someone, they should make the definition of the show, Shane interviews people moderately older than himself, because I love talking to older people because they drop a lot of truth bombs and they're going to die, so they don't give a shit. They're like, yeah, fucking Buzz Aldrin, we didn't land on the fucking moon. So, I love talking to these old guys, but who's the demo? I mean, it's an online demo, and podcasts. So you yourself have one, and I believe you're like super like Substacky, and you're doing your own thing, and you've left the old media, and now you're new media. Well, guess what? Good old Shane is doing the same thing in his old age. We're going where the medium takes us, and where we can have some sort of agency over what we say, and where the people will listen to us. And I think that, I've never made a decision, based on where I think it's going to go or who I think I'm talking to. It's just like, it's an exciting time. You're doing one, I'm doing one. It's an exciting time to do a podcast and to go direct to your listeners, whomever they are.
Correct. Now, Shane, I have a lot of other questions to ask you, but we haven't revealed who one of your very first big guests is going to be. The biggest podcaster.
Well, I'm not gonna say that because it does. There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip. There's going to be a lot of surprise guests, but I'm not going to say it until I actually go shoot it, which is very soon. Which is therein lies the rub, which is very soon. But yet we do have many special guests who have been very generous with their time to come on the show and participate on the show, and also me participate on their show. So, for example, one just the great Rick Rubin. I love him. What a special cat. And we did that, and it worked so well that I'm going to be doing that with some other big names in the podcasting world.
I'm just curious, did you guys talk about Diddy?
No.
Okay. So Diddy, to me, Diddy is like, because I've had someone very smart text me saying Diddy reveals the existence of the Illuminati. I mean, I had no idea what this person was talking about, but I think that I think things like that, people see, kind of going back to the deep state point, people see conspiracy, they see forces working behind the scenes that never make it into the media.
Yeah, I've seen the Illuminati at work, and it's kind of boring. I mean, like, I used to go to two things that were very Illuminati-esque, and I'm not going to say which they are because I kind of want to be invited back. But there are definite conferences where policy wonks, senators, congresspeople, some cabinet level people, heads of CIA, heads of Homeland, meet with rich people and famous people, and they try to determine things, that will be beneficial for them. Does that happen? Yes. Do they eat very well? Yes. Are there famous people doing entertainment? Yes. Is there chicken blood and Baphomet and Baal, and are there bulls being sacrificed to the banking system?
Please say yes.
No, not that I've seen, but maybe they don't let me in the back room. But it's sort of boring. It's what you think. It's policy wonks talking to hyper nerds about things that you don't really understand until 3 years later. But no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
Mm-hmm. Well, curious, what do you think of Elon Musk?
Look, that's a fucking great, I was about to say, if Elon Musk says it and Rogan retweets it, it becomes law. I think that Elon is a fascinating character. And I did a thing one time before 2008, the number one selling car was the Hummer. And then after 2009, it was the Prius. And this has done more to, affect change than any other environmental, because I'm an environmentalist, I've been working on it for 30 years. Unsuccessfully, and all of a sudden this thing. Look, Elon made electric cars cool. Is that a perfect solution? No, but is it a step in the right direction? Yes. He's the leader in solar energy, the leader in battery power, which battery power and retention of battery power is the whole key to solar. And at some point, he went from being, the coolest motherfucker on the planet who's doing more to change the world than anybody else, to fuck him, he's rich. And there's a whole us against them thing that happens, and I think he's a fascinating character. I think the fact that they asked a private company to go save people from the space station because we can't do it. So they're like, Elon, can you fucking save our astronauts? And he's, changing consumer patterns. And by the way, not just consumer patterns, because not just from Tesla, now everybody has to do electric cars to keep up with Tesla, and changing battery power. And, the worst thing, people say is, well, he's rich or he's arrogant or he's this or he's that. I mean, he makes Hearst look like nothing. I get it. But I find him to be fascinating. And again, Shane Smith has questions. And Elon, if you're listening to this, I think you'd be the most interesting person to interview because I have questions about all of that.
So you were talking about Elon getting people having resentment towards him because he became one of the wealthiest men on the planet, given what day they're doing the market calculations.
Yeah.
And on a media level, which is very different from a tech level, you've gone through a version of this yourself.
I handed you the segue.
Beyond. So thank you for that. So just to recap for, let's see, any Gen Z listeners, Vice was the darling of the 2010s. Everyone was trying to get as big as possible. You succeeded more than anybody in raising money to finance the growth. And you did something, which when I ran the Hollywood Reporter, there was a line in a story by Michael Wolff who said, Shane Smith is great at making old men feel younger. And you had you had some older men. Yes, you had some older men. I see a pattern here that we had in our earlier Rupert Murdoch, Bob Iger. Who else? Lots of people in Hollywood still looking for a solution on how to move forward into the next generation. But a lot of people gave you a lot of money, and people did not cover that. I felt
they didn't cover their bets.
No.
They didn't cover it.
Well, okay. So I want to ask you a couple things about that.
You're trying to be politically nice to me, but just hit me.
Do you wish you had proceeded differently? Because ultimately, all that money ended up being the rise and the fall.
Yes, love the question. It's a very easy answer, and in fact, in my defense, I called it many times during the heyday of Vice. I said in my McTaggart lecture, look, Vice will become big, we will become the status quo, and we will become exactly what we're kicking against the pricks doing now, A. B, economically, everyone's looking for who left the porthole open on the Titanic, right? And nobody's saying, it hit a fucking iceberg. And I said this from the beginning, and I'll keep saying it now. It was the big three, now it's the big five. It was 71 cents of every dollar, it's now 87 cents of every advertising dollar. Online goes to 5 companies. So the rest of the world, you, me, everybody, the Variety, the Hollywood Reporter, everybody gets the rest, which is the death of independent media, okay? Vice was the poster child of independent media. Despite having Disney and Fox and everybody on our board, we were independent, we were private, and we were trying to be a challenger brand. And I was saying, look, who do you use as a search engine? Google is a monopoly. Amazon is a monopoly. Facebook at the time was a monopoly for online video. And they suck up all the audience and they suck up all the money. And in the heyday, not today, this isn't retrospect. In the heyday, I said it many, many times, this will be the death of Vice and it will be the death of independent media, which it is. And I also said, and you can watch my McTaggart lecture, I said, before it all happened, I said there's going to be a consolidation, not just in digital, but in mainstream media. Fox got bought by Disney, Disco, in the weirdest one of all time, bought Time Warner, but previous it was bought by AT&T. There's going to be this consolidation, which I called before it happened, and everyone said, oh, Shane, what a bombastic guy. It all happened, and I said at the same time, the reason why all this consolidation will happen is because the money is going to 3 companies, now 5, but it's more money, and everybody else can suck eggs. And the reason why you and I are doing podcasts on Substack is because we're going direct to consumer, because there is no more advertising for independent media. Now, that's your story, and that's your headline, and that should be everybody's headline. When Google and YouTube and Amazon and Facebook's profits come in, and when the government is like, oh, by the way, these guys look like monopolies, and we should maybe think about breaking them up, then they should look back and say, okay, what's the fucking market cap of BuzzFeed? What's the market cap? Where did all these independent magazines go? What happened to Vice? Oh, Shane Smith was too bombastic. He convinced Rupert Murdoch and Jeff Bewkes, and what a good flim-flam artist. And oh my God, Bob Iger. Yeah, these are smart guys. Nobody's pulling the wool over their eyes about anything. And if I was such a good snake oil artist, I would be fucking selling snake oil right now. The thing is media hit a wall. And that should be the cover story on the New York Times, because it's going to eat them too. And by the way, they're making deals with the devil on AI.
Open AI, right?
100%. And because they have to, and that's another thing, we haven't even gotten into AI. If you want the headline is, you thought it was bad before, well, guess what? Here's AI. And you're doing exactly the right thing, and so am I, quite frankly, in that we're going directly to the fucking viewer who don't want advertising as part of their news anyway, because it's advertisers. Well, it's also advertisers of the news censors, quite frankly. And so if you want to get into it, there's your headline. The companies that you know and love, and you know that are monopolies, they sucked all the air out of the room, and all independent media went away, or is going away, or is being consolidated. And that's the story. And if you want the conspiracy theory, you want the deep state version of Shane Smith did this and then fucking flared out, then I get that that's the story. The real story, much like the assassination stories, is not as exciting, but that's the true story.
Okay, so Shane, there was a moment in time when the media was writing that the solution would have been for Vice to merge with BuzzFeed and Vox and survive into the next.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
No, it would have eventually happened to everyone.
I mean, it's the same thing. We're all fighting for the same dollars. It would have maybe prolonged things a little bit. And look, I'm friends with Jim. I'm friends with Jonah. I have nothing but respect for those guys. It's hard to build something from scratch. But look, those dollars are going away. And sorry, I didn't even get to that point, which is AI is going to come around and disrupt even more of this, and the big money is going to take even more of the money. So, I mean, like maybe, we would have lasted long enough to become an AI studio. I don't know. But all of those companies got the shit smacked out of them. And it's because the big trillion-dollar monopolies are taking all the money, and there's none left over for independent media. Sorry.
Okay, so Shane, what's media in 3 to 5 years?
Great question. This is what we should be chopping it up about. Look, you want to talk about news and AI. I'm just going to give you a brief. When the last Hollywood strike was a metaphysical strike because it's people who are staring the end of their existence in the face. News is perfectly designed for this revolution. Why? Because news should be called olds. Because every newsroom, and I know of which I speak, would get a wire service. So you get, Reuters or AP or somebody, and it comes into the newsroom, and you go, shit, Israel's bombing Beirut. And then you send a crew in, and you get the people, and they go on planes, and they get a shooter and a cutter and a producer and a talent, and they go down there and they stand in front of the car, and 3 days ago, this car was bombed. I don't know why he's Australian. But it should be called olds because it fucking already happened. Now, imagine if Reuters sends in your thing and I have a publishing medallion and I just go feed that into Lore Machine and out comes video, out comes pictures, out comes, by the way, read to you on Substack by your individual newscaster who you picked reading your news, and it happens right away. Bango. And there's no time lag. And by the way, it's been verified by Reuters or AP, or it doesn't even need to be verified. If you don't want it verified, you can get citizen journalists who are on the ground, people like yourself, who will send in shit, and then that can be turned into video. And and by the way, on Substack or Patreon or whoever the fuck you want, you can actually have your own newscaster. By the way, I'll go even further. You can have Walter Cronkite reading it to you in the 1950s. You can have Peter Jennings reading it to you and it looks like 1970s Vietnam footage. You can have any newscaster. You can have Barbara Walters from 1982. You can have anybody from any era and any style reading you your news that comes in through Apple News, through Reuters, through independent journalists, whoever the fuck you want. It'll come in and it'll read it to you. Now, that's the future of news. Why? Because there's nothing better than that. And it's going to be individualistic. So if that's what's going to happen with news, just because it has to, then that's going to happen with media. It's going to be the synthesis of AI is all human endeavor done by machines. If you think that media is going to be any different than trucking, than agribusiness, than anything that AI is going to take over, banking, then you're smoking crack. You can strike all you want, but AI is taking over media, and it's going to upset everything.
Would you rather be running a studio right now in Hollywood or running a massive news operation?
Everyone is going to have the power to be their own studio. What I would be doing is exactly what you're doing, which is talk to interesting people about interesting shit directly to the audience, have your own audience, your own Substack thing, control your own destiny, control your own message, control what you have to say. Fuck big platforms, fuck big advertisers. They killed us in the long run. It's just us directly to the audience. I love you. I love the audience. I love life. I gotta go. You're the best person on earth.
All right. Give your last pitch on the podcast. Where do we find it? When?
That's a great question. Best question of all time. Wherever podcasts are heard.
So they say. That's the phrase.
At Shane Smith Has Questions on YouTube, Vice, socials will show you where to go and where greater podcasts are heard, including yours.
All right. Well, Shane, nice.
Shane Smith Has Questions.
On YouTube.
On YouTube.
And everywhere you get your podcast.
Shane Smith Has Questions on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast.